Um, so yes, my name is Henrik. I'm a lawyer at the Hedman Partners law firm. We have been actively engaged in the ICO space and the blockchain and token economy space for the past couple of years. We have seen some fantastic technologies built around tokens. We have also seen some people who are just trying to get their hand into the honeypot, unfortunately. But my today's talk will focus on using ICOs as a means of raising funds. And as a lawyer, I will discuss some of the legal framework on what is allowed and disallowed in the ICO space. But to start, just to understand the crowd, how many of you have been involved in any ICO projects? Okay. A few. And how many of you have been considering to carry out an ICO? Okay, also a couple. And how many of you really don't know what an ICO is? Okay, so we have a nice kind of a setup here. So I will do just a very basic introduction to ICOs. ICOs are initial coin offerings, and they're basically a form of crowdfunding. Just like any other kind of crowdfunding, the company raises funds from the public to develop its services or products. There are other forms of crowdfunding, such as an IPO or the initial public offering, where the company provides shares, or Kickstarter, where the company provides products. In course of an ICO, what the company provides to the investors is a cryptographic token, which has some kind of rights attached to it. So, these tokens are, they're not the general purpose cryptocurrencies like a Bitcoin. Usually they have a very specific functions which somehow enables to use them in a closed platform or for certain services. And they have very certain characteristics which has made the whole ICO market very popular. The tokens are widely accessible to all. Almost everybody can buy and sell tokens, which is one of the reasons why there is such a huge boom in the ICO market. They are very, very liquid, so it's very easy to buy and sell the tokens. The transaction cost to actually buy and sell tokens, it's much smaller compared to, for example, shares. So they have those characteristics which are very positive for them, and we have already seen that there is this huge popularity with ICOs. Companies have raised tens and tens of millions. Most of those projects actually don't deserve probably the fees that they are receiving, but at least the fact is that ICOs definitely have a very big appeal. So here is a graph from the CoinDesk, which shows that by the end of 2017, or actually by November of 2017, 3.5 billion US dollars were raised via ICOs. By the end of 2017, this number was actually about 4 billion euros. According to some statistics, it was close to 5 billion euros or US dollars. So what is it really that the investors received in course of the ICOs? They received some kind of rights, as I mentioned. The most common rights is access to platform or certain services or certain or a certain kind of basically access to services or a platform. The most common or most famous example is probably Ethereum, which provided its token Ether, enabling to access its blockchain, and on top of which new applications were able to be built. So actually they made the token which they issued in course of the ICO the fundamental part of their whole business model. Everything pretty much revolved around the token. So it was a very clever way to raise funds because the token had great value. It enabled to access their platform, and they actually were enabled to raise a lot of money. There are other rights attached to the tokens, such as discount rights. So, for example, the token enables to use the services for a 20% discount or more. Some tokens are purely to basically replace money in the transaction chain in kind of a closed platform or in a closed community. So actually, it's possible to get quite creative. There are quite a lot of different rights that can be attached to the tokens. On top of that, tokens also often provide rights such as dividend rights or company governance rights or other kind of profit rights. One pretty typical or widely used thing to do seems to be that the money received from the token is reinvested into other cryptocurrencies. So if the value of the other cryptocurrencies rises, the value of the token rises. Seems like a good way to make profit, sure. But from the legal perspective, this is where the shit hits the fan. Sorry for the cliche. But these tokens are considered to be what are widely referred to as security tokens, which means that these tokens are actually regulated by security laws. And securities are shares, bonds, stocks, investment fund units, different kind of investment vehicles. And if security laws apply to tokens, then it means that to issue tokens, if a company wants to raise 30 million euros in course of ICO and wants to attach profit rights to the token, then it basically has to go through the same process as it would have to do if it wants to carry out an IPO. So there are so much rules attached there. So for example, the company has to create this very thorough information document called prospectus, which will bring about legal fees and consultation fees. Even in a relatively cheap country as Estonia, it would be above 50,000 euros. Then this prospectus would have to be registered at the Financial Supervision Authority. There is even a question of whether it's even possible to make a prospectus for tokens, because prospectus foresees that the security is registered in a security registry, which is the centralized registry which kind of tracks the exchange of securities. But tokens, as we know, are actually exchanged on the blockchain. And these two, at least currently, are not really compatible. So there are these lots of issues with security tokens. And the result of that is that nobody who has some basic legal knowledge is trying to issue security tokens today. They all want to issue utility tokens. Now, utility tokens, in their widest sense, are basically any token which is not a security token. So all of the tokens which rights are in the column on the left. And what is the result of that? The problem is that for many of those companies that want to access these crowd funds, want to carry out an ICO, they actually don't have a business model which would really be compatible with utility tokens, that you don't really have any kind of rights to attach to the token. So what they do often is that they provide some kind of really random or pretty pointless rights in the token, the main one being discount right, so that, and we saw it in 2017 with really many projects which raised like 1, 5, 10, 15 million euros, and pretty much all the investor received was like a 20% discount right to a service which was still in development by a team which had no track record. And this kind of market cannot last. Sooner or later, the investors, even if it's considered to be stupid money, will realize that many of the rights attached to tokens are quite stupid, quite pointless, don't really give much value. So on that regard, where do the ICOs seem to be heading? There is actually two directions which seem to be more and more visible right now. There are those projects for which utility tokens really, really make sense. I brought the Ethereum example, or any kind of technology which really builds the underlying protocol. For those, tokens can be very, utility tokens can be a fantastic opportunity. Or another example, in the music industry, we are seeing tokenization of the royalties. So you might know that if a song is played on the radio, then the author has the right to receive like 0.0002 cents each time the song is played. But then this money is moved to a middleman, who then moves this money to a collective author society, who then moves this money further. So eventually, when the musician receives the money, so much of that has been evaporated to just thin air, to the payment service providers, to the banks, to the middleman, and so forth. So there are today projects trying to tokenize this whole process, that there is money only at the end point and at the beginning point, and everything in between is tokenized. So you can move the same token from the radio station to the author and actually cut out all of the costs that would be related to the money, and also make the whole process more transparent. Or there's also projects in the content creation that today mainly the content is on the internet is provided for free, but then there are premium services, and then there are ads which really nobody likes, but there is not a better business model. Tokens enable to create a better business model. Tokens would very easily give the ability to, if you read a good, interesting article, or you read an interesting answer on Quora, to just provide tokens as a reward or compensation mechanism. And this is not really feasible to do with money because of the transactions, but tokens would really take away all of the hassle and make this kind of thing possible. So there are also other different kind of business model, different kind of projects where tokens are a fantastic idea. But for many startups, utility tokens do not really make sense. For many startups, so it seems as if today most startups could not access the ICO market. But there is actually also another solution which is quite often ignored, which is that in many jurisdictions there are exemptions in security laws, which basically say that if the company or the team is not too greedy, they can also provide security tokens. For example, in Estonia, there is an exemption which says that if the company raises less than 2.5 million euros, which means that ICO hard cap would be less than 2.5 million euros, then no security restrictions would have to be followed, which means that the prospectus wouldn't have to be created, no licensing needs, nothing to register in the Financial Supervision Authority. It actually provides the ability for the company to provide tokens which have real incentive for the investor. So you could actually provide rights which are similar to dividend rights. And I think this is an interesting opportunity which is very widely ignored by the startups. And on top of that, we also see today that the governments are really seeing the potential of ICOs, because actually most governments are already working on draft laws to kind of regulate the ICO space. There was a joke in the previous panel about Russia that you know they are the ones who don't do anything, are the most conservative. Actually, Russia just proposed a draft law to regulate ICOs. Sure, it creates restrictions. For example, maximum investment amount per project for a normal person is $900 unless the person is an investor. But what it also means is that Russia basically is endorsing ICOs. And many of the governments and in many of the jurisdictions, we are starting to see regulations which would make the ICOs more secure, which would ensure that there wouldn't be anti-money laundering and there wouldn't be terrorist financing carried out in course of the ICO. So there really seems to be space for startups to access here already now, and even more so in the future, that this is a way to actually raise funds for even startups that don't have a way to issue utility tokens. So that is all from me. Thank you.
Questions as well.
Sure.
We had a catch box here we can throw around. I really like to play around with this thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to throw it yourself if somebody raises it? Does anybody want him to throw you a ball so you can answer a question?
Yeah.
Yes. Look, there's a guy.
No,
you don't have to come closer.
You're coming too close.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yep. In the States at the moment, as we know, the Securities Exchange Commission has expressed interest to apply regulations.
Right.
Do you foresee that those organisations based in the States that have issued utility tokens will legitimise them and enable them to be security tokens to get shares in the business?
It's a difficult question because I really have no idea what the SEC in the United States is going to do, unfortunately. I guess they're going to have to create some kind of a mechanism there because there is just so much money already involved. There are so many tokens already distributed, so they probably have to create something to make this space legal also.
Do you think there's motivation on the part of the ICO issuing company to change their token from utility to security so that then US citizens can invest and fund managers can invest? Does that seem like a logical process?
Yes, it does, because for many companies, they don't really have a logical function to give to the utility token. The rights that they can provide, there are those projects where it makes sense and those where it really doesn't make sense. And for many companies, providing rights similar to dividends is really the only way to incentivize the investor.
Any other questions? Yes, please take this. Anu, can you help me? Can you throw the catch box there? Look, there is a gentleman. You have to stand up. Yes. Nearly. It's okay.
Hey.
By the way, she's the main organizer of Garage Hardware and Arts. Just to let you know that you have a very important person in the room. Yes, go on.
My question was, how do you, Estonian tax institution, how does it see ICOs and its raised capital, and how do you see Estonia as a place where you can go in, make a startup, raise your utility token, and then turn your ICO money into cash? How does Estonian tax institution look on to that?
Actually, the real problem with Estonia, doing ICOs in Estonia, is the question of about banks, because the banks are actually the ones who really do not want to open accounts for any ICO projects because they just don't trust the ICO money currently. So that is really the issue. On the taxation part, it's taxed like any other kind of revenue in Estonia. So there is not. It's not taxed on the moment that the ICO money is received. It's only taxed if you actually take this money out as a profit, at least the income tax. And the VAT is not also applicable for the money received in course of the ICOs.
Any other? Can you throw the?
I think
you wanted to add something?
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
I just wanted to maybe you can expand. So that means if you automatically you need to calculate that you will need to pay income tax for your ICO capital. Does that? That's what are you saying?
It's so in Estonia the taxation system is so that the income tax, you don't pay the income tax at the moment you earn the revenue. You only pay the income tax if you take the money out as a dividends, basically. So if you earn the money, if you reinvest it into your company, then you actually don't pay income tax on that.
Yep. Estonian companies don't have an income tax yet.
Yeah.
Latvian as well, by the way. So there was a question here. Can you throw the box in front? Excellent. And this will be the last question.
Yeah. So security regulations, it's not about making it harder to raise capital, but to protect the investor so he gets what he paid for. So, but in ICOs, mostly it's like people just believe something, it's written in some white paper and they just give the money. How do you see solving this investor protection issue with the regulations?
Well, how do I see solving? It's still going to be solved by regulations because sooner or later there will have to be draft legislation in basically each jurisdiction about basically forcing the companies to meet some kind of a market standard when they carry out ICOs. And this is the main way forward to make it sure. For example, in Estonia, we also have currently a working group which purpose is to create this kind of a best standards to make sure that what happens with the tokens when it's used, what kind of rights can be attached to the tokens, what kind of a KYC or know your customer process has to be carried out, and so forth.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing the stage. Give him a big applause.